Welcome to Tech Disruptions, deep dives into the technologies reshaping industries, from AI to quantum to biotech. Let's get into it.
A recent analysis revealed something deeply unsettling. 1 in 277 papers indexed in PubMed in 2026 contained fabricated references. That's not just a typo, it's a ghost citation, pointing to a source that simply doesn't exist.
And the mechanism behind it? AI hallucinations. We're seeing large language models generating highly plausible, yet entirely fictional citations that are now making their way into published scientific literature.
So researchers are effectively using AI to invent academic sources, and these are passing through peer review and ending up in one of the most critical databases for medical and scientific information. This isn't just sloppy research, it appears to be a foundational threat.
It absolutely is. PubMed is a bedrock for medical professionals and scientists globally. If its integrity is compromised by AI-generated fictions, the ripple effects on medical practice, drug development, and even public health policy could be catastrophic.
To unpack that statistic for a moment, 1 in 277, PubMed indexes millions of papers annually. Even if we're just talking about 2026, that number suggests a significant volume of ghost citations are out there, undermining trust in the entire system.
That's precisely the concern. Think of the sheer scale. If PubMed indexes, say, 1 million papers a year, we're talking about thousands of papers in a single year containing these phantom references. And these aren't just obscure journals, these are papers making it into a database considered a gold standard. The implications are profound, because researchers often don't check every single citation in a reference list. They trust that the peer review process and the journal's editorial oversight have already validated these sources.
So we're not just talking about academic misconduct, which has always existed in various forms. This is a new, insidious flavor of it, powered by a tool designed for generating text, not necessarily for verifying facts. How exactly does an AI hallucinate a citation? Is it trying to trick people, or is it just making its best guess at what should be there?
It's the latter, but with a critical distinction. An AI, particularly a large language model, doesn't know facts in the human sense. Its training involves predicting the next most plausible token or word in a sequence based on vast amounts of data. When asked to generate text, including references, it doesn't cross-reference a factual database to see if a paper by Smith and Jones on neural networks in 2023 actually exists. Instead, it generates a title, authors, journal name, year, and even a plausible DOI that sounds correct and fits the context of the surrounding text. It's essentially bluffing with extreme confidence.
So it's like a really convincing but ultimately made-up backstory for a character in a novel. It fits the narrative, but it's not real.
Exactly. And because these models are trained on real scientific literature, they've learned the patterns of how citations are structured, what academic language looks like, and common research topics. So when it hallucinates, it doesn't just invent gibberish. It invents something that is perfectly structured and contextually relevant, making it incredibly difficult to spot at a glance. It's not a broken URL. It's a fully formed but fictional bibliographic entry.
That makes a lot of sense. The model isn't being malicious, it's just doing what it's trained to do, generate plausible text. But then it's the human researchers who are choosing to use this AI output without verification, effectively introducing these fictions into the scientific record. What are the incentives at play here? Why would a researcher risk their reputation to include a fabricated citation?
There are several powerful incentives that converge here. First, there's immense pressure to publish, often called publish or perish. Researchers need to demonstrate productivity for funding, promotions, and career advancement. AI tools offer a way to speed up the drafting process, including literature review. Second, there's a certain laziness or over-reliance on the tool. If an AI can generate a reference section in seconds, the temptation to simply copy and paste without critical review is strong, especially when deadlines loom. Finally, there's a potential for malicious intent, though less common. Someone could deliberately insert fake citations to bolster a weak argument or to create an illusion of deeper scholarship.
So it's a combination of systemic pressure, convenience, and a failure of oversight, both from the author and potentially from the peer review process itself. That aspect of the situation is particularly troubling. Peer review is supposed to be the gatekeeper. How are these ghost citations slipping past experienced reviewers and journal editors?
That's the million-dollar question, and it highlights a critical vulnerability in the current peer review system. Reviewers are volunteers, often pressed for time, and typically focus on the methodology, results, and overall conclusions of a paper. They might skim the literature review and check a few key citations, but it's simply not feasible for them to manually verify every single reference in a bibliography that could contain dozens or even hundreds of entries.
It's like asking a building inspector to check every single brick in a skyscraper. They're going to look for structural integrity, not individual material provenance.
Exactly. And the AI-generated citations are often so convincing in their format and plausibility that they don't immediately raise red flags. A reviewer might see Smith et al. 2023, Journal of Clinical Research, and assume it's legitimate, especially if the title sounds relevant to the argument being made. The process relies heavily on trust, and AI is exploiting that trust at scale.
So this isn't just about errors or honest mistakes. It's about a systematic undermining of the trust that the scientific community places in its own review mechanisms. What are the practical implications of a ghost citation making its way into the scientific record? Beyond just being false, how does that cascade through research?
The downstream effects are considerable and potentially dangerous. Imagine a researcher conducting a meta-analysis, which is a study that synthesizes findings from multiple previous studies. If their analysis includes papers with fabricated references, their conclusions could be skewed or based on non-existent evidence. In medicine, this could mean clinical guidelines being influenced by phantom research, leading to suboptimal treatments or even harm to patients. Drug discovery could go down blind alleys. Even at a more fundamental level, it wastes time and resources as other researchers try to follow up on these non-existent studies. It's like building a house on a foundation of sand, but the sand looks exactly like concrete.
So a researcher might spend months trying to track down a paper that simply doesn't exist, believing it's a critical piece of the puzzle, only to come up empty-handed. That's a huge drain on resources. How are these ghost citations being detected then, if peer review isn't catching them consistently?
Currently, detection largely relies on painstaking manual verification or, ironically, on other AI tools designed to spot anomalies. The initial analysis that found the 1 in 277 figure likely involved automated scanning for broken DOIs, improbable journal names, or titles that don't match known publications. However, even these methods aren't foolproof, as a sophisticated AI could generate a plausible-looking DOI that just points to nowhere, or a journal title that's slightly off a real one. It often comes down to individual researchers or sharp-eyed librarians eventually trying to access a cited paper and discovering it's a phantom.
It sounds like we're playing a perpetual game of whack-a-mole, with the AI constantly getting better at camouflage. And this raises the question of responsibility. Who is ultimately accountable when a paper with ghost citations is published? The author who used the AI, the journal that published it, or even the AI developer?
Legally and ethically, the primary responsibility lies with the authors. They are the ones submitting the work and are ultimately accountable for its accuracy and integrity. Journals also bear a responsibility for their editorial processes and the quality of their peer review. While AI tools are a powerful aid, they are just that. They don't absolve the human user of their professional obligations. As for AI developers, their responsibility is more about designing safeguards and clearly communicating the limitations and potential for hallucination of their models, especially when used in high-stakes domains like scientific research.
So the burden of proof, the burden of verification, is increasingly falling back onto the human element, even as the scale of information generation is exploding. This isn't just a problem for PubMed, it suggests a broader challenge for any domain that relies on verifiable information.
Absolutely. This isn't contained to medical literature. We're seeing similar issues emerge in legal research, financial reporting, and even journalism, where AI can generate plausible but false narratives or references. The ghost citation problem in PubMed is a vivid illustration of a much larger systemic challenge to our entire information ecosystem. The trustworthiness of any AI-generated content, especially when it purports to cite external sources, must now be questioned and rigorously verified.
So, what does this mean for the future of research? Do we need new tools, new review processes, or a fundamental shift in how we approach published work?
It's likely all three. We'll need more sophisticated AI tools specifically designed for citation verification, perhaps integrated directly into submission systems. Peer review will need to adapt, potentially with a dedicated phase for citation auditing. But most importantly, there needs to be a cultural shift among researchers, a recognition that AI is a powerful assistant, not a replacement for critical thinking and meticulous verification. The default assumption can no longer be that a citation is legitimate just because it looks convincing.
So, to summarize, the scientific community is grappling with a new subtle form of integrity breach, where AI-generated fabricated references are slipping into trusted databases like PubMed. This is driven by publication pressures and the plausible-sounding nature of AI hallucinations, challenging the very bedrock of peer review.
And the consequences are far-reaching, from misinformed research pathways to potential impacts on medical decisions. The onus is increasingly on human researchers and editors to rigorously verify information, even as the volume of information, some of it entirely fictional, continues to explode.
The core takeaway seems to be that the convenience of AI comes with a profound responsibility for verification. For listeners, the practical implication is that any information that relies on citations, especially if it originates from or passes through AI-assisted processes, now demands an even higher degree of scrutiny.
Indeed, the era of unquestioned citations is over. The question now becomes, how do we rebuild trust in a system that can so easily be saturated with convincing fictions? And what level of verification will become acceptable when the cost of manual checks becomes prohibitive?
That's all for this episode of Tech Disruptions. Join us next time as we keep exploring the technologies reshaping our world. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Stay curious out there.